Hi, this is Randal Wimmer and welcome to the Entrepreneur Sound Off. Today's topic is perhaps one of my favorite because it is the secret sauce. This is the holy grail that everybody's seeking with respect to finding the winning strategy. And it's a simple strategy. It may not be that easy to execute, but the strategy itself is extraordinarily simple. Here it is. You must find markets in the federal government contracting industry where your set aside is underrepresented. And then when you find these markets, what you do is you differentiate your company from the limited competitive field. Sounds simple, doesn't it? It is. However, it takes some work to accomplish this. 95% of all U.S. companies, and there's about 31.7 million of them, choose not to pursue work with the world's largest customer. So, which is the U.S. federal government. Because only 5% of our natural competitors pursue federal government contracts. Only 5%. So what you have to do in order to consistently win and grow, even though you're only competing against 5% of your natural competition, 5% of a very big number is a very big number. What you have to do is you got to find underpopulated markets, and then you got to further discriminate your company from that competitive field. And that's how you penetrate markets. That's how you expand into new areas, and that's how you consistently win and grow. This works. I finally figured this out. I finally figured it out. It took me years to figure this out. Years. Closer to over a half a decade. I'm not joking when I say that. And once I figured it out, check this out. I was a one-person company. And I got my competitive field down to only 6 other bidders. I was one of 7. So I had a 1 in 7 chance of winning, in essence, $5 million. Took me over 7 years in order to win that first prime contract. 7 years is what it took. Why? Because I was in bad markets. I had bad outreach, and my company had a bad look about it. I was an idiot. I made all 3 of these mistakes. And you know what? Looking back on it, I wasn't the only one making these mistakes. The overwhelming majority of all small business owners are making all 3 of these mistakes. And that's to your advantage. If you figure out how not to make those mistakes, you are way far ahead of the power curve, and the odds just shifted to your favor. I'll show you how bad it was. This is an example. I believe that since I was a service-disabled veteran-owned small business, that I would have a competitive advantage pursuing things in the Veterans Administration because they really give it, they really focus on SDVOSB awards. And that was a correct statement. They really do focus and give a lot of awards to SDVOSBs. So I decided to bid on this effort, and so did 54 of my closest friends, who were also SDVOSBs, because we were thinking all the same things. We made that same mistake. We didn't think through it. We thought hey, no, it's obvious. It's a VA, and I'm an SDVOSB. Let's do it. Yeah. I had a 1 in 55 chance. Even with corporate credentials, even qualifications and credentials that make you special, out of 55 bidders, there's a bunch of them going to have them. You're not going to be successful. Even if you're in a niche market, the competitive field is still so great, and there's still a large number of companies who are smart enough to go out and get corporate credentials and discriminators. Only way that you can win consistently in this industry is to find underpopulated markets where they can't find enough of your particular set aside, and doing whatever it is that you do, and that you've got a differentiator. That is the game plan. It's not hard. It's simple. Find underpopulated markets where they can't find enough of your type of company doing what it is that you do, and then get a corporate discriminator. Again, you do not want to be this guy. You do not want to be a war fighter that comes right out. He leaves the military, and what does he do? He takes his SDVOSB and he immediately jumps into a mainstream service offering in DoD or VA. because what he's really doing is he's fishing from the pier like everybody else, and he's wondering why the hell he's not catching any fish. So what do I mean when I say you've got to find markets that are underpopulated with your type of business? This right here is a list of subcontracting goals. It's you go to the SBA, go to the SBA Small Business Scorecard, and it'll pop up in a quick Google. And then what you do is you go to each individual agency, and they'll tell you how well they did meeting their various goals, their prime contracting goal and their subcontracting goals, not only for small business as a whole, but for each individual set aside. And there's 4 individual set aside. There's women-owned small business, 8A, SDVOSB, and hub zone. Yellow means that they missed their goal. This is just for subcontracting. Prime contracting, they did a little bit better, but not much. But this is just for subcontracting, because this is where you really want to differentiate for market penetration. You may not be ready to start bidding on prime contracts, so that's why we're focusing on subcontracts here. This is crazy. Now, sometimes these numbers can be misleading, and in the case for VA doesn't give a crap about their subcontracting goals. Why? Because they are exclusively focused on giving prime contracts to SDVOSBs. Let's say you're an SDVOSB, you're a one-person SDVOSB hub zone. They're meeting 1/3 of their goal. 1/3 of their set-aside goal. It's supposed to be 3%. They got 1%, 1.1%. HHS, they do everything. It's a massive organization. It's either the second or third largest budgeted agency in our entire federal government. However, I want you to even look at DOD. DOD doesn't even meet their goals. And you say, well, why don't they meet their service disabled veteran and small business goals? Well, because most of the SDVOSBs, most of these veterans leaving it, they're at the pointy end of the spear. They're doing mission. They're doing frontline mission stuff. So when they launch their SDVOSB company, where do you think that they focus? On what they're most used to do, that frontline stuff. Well, not too many people in the DoD are getting out and say, you know what, I want to do acquisition support services. There are about that many SDVOSB companies doing that. Or how about this? I want to do, budget analysis. My God, man, I'd rather be beaten with a stick. That's what most of these veterans are thinking, and they're missing out on the opportunities. Even within DoD, all the different service requirements that they have, the SDVOSBs aren't even pursuing those. They're just staying around their tiny little mission area that they did while they were in service. So you got to get out of that. You got to get into areas where there's fewer of your type. But HHS, look at that. 2/3 of their goal, 2/3 of that earmark went to another set aside or went to a small business in general, because they couldn't find enough SDVOSBs or hub zones to meet that subcontracting goal. So this is what I'm talking about with a bad look. Everybody thinks that you're going to be given a teaming agreement or a subcontract because of how great you are at whatever it is that you do. The people who are going to give you a teaming agreement, they're not the people who are going to be managing the contract. These people are in the business development world. They're in the growth world. The person who's going to be managing, he hasn't even been hired yet. They only hire those people if they win it. So, so what's the number one criteria of whether or not you're going to get picked up on a bid team? It's whether or not your company can help them win. They don't care about how well you are, because that can never go in a proposal. They can't say ABC Corporation is really, 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 really good at IT services. They can't say that. They don't even care if you're doing $10 million in IT services every single year. Here's why. None of your past performances as a small business doing $10 million a year is even going to come close to the past performance that they're looking for a $1 billion bid effort. They're going to use IBMs. They're going to use Northrop Grumman's. They're going to use Khakis, Leidos, SAIC's past performance. They're going to use that $3 billion one or that $500 million one or whatever it is. They're not going to use your $3 million a year contract. They're just not going to do it. So your past performances are largely irrelevant to them. What they want is they want something tangible. They want something tangible from you. You've got to have something that they can write about your company that's going to add value and increase their probability of winning. And being a small business or being one of these specific set-asides doesn't add value. It does not add value at all. So what's the answer here? Well, the answer is simple. You give the prime bidders what they want. They want to work with very mature, low-risk small businesses because you are introducing an element of risk to them. All small businesses are perceived to be risky. You got to do something to mitigate that risk. Otherwise, they don't want to work with you. They don't, because they're scared that you're going to mess up their proposal. You're going to violate something. They're scared that if you win, you're going to mess up the contract. You're going to violate something. You're not going to be able to pay your people, and they're going to get egg on their face. They want to make sure that you are a mature, low-risk small business. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is they want you to be able to bring something. And the only thing that you can bring when you're a small business is basically a corporate credential. ISO is the only corporate credential that I'm aware of that most small businesses can ascertain, that they can obtain. And there's others out there. The other big one is CMMI appraisal. Now, the difference between CMMI appraisal and ISO certification is that CMI takes somewhere between 4 months to a year plus to obtain, and you need to have at least 3 completed projects, translate contracts in order to be audited. To become ISO certified, you need to be operating as a business where you are complying with the ISO standard for 3 months. Now, you can be operating as a small business without revenue, without employees, without an office. You just got to be operating as a business. You got to be a legal business, and you have to be doing this for 3 months. So that's why I talk about ISO. And the other thing about ISO is it is so much easier to obtain when you're a small business. The sexiest certification going around right now, probably the hottest one, is ISO 27001, Information Security Management, for obvious reasons. We're having data leaches, cybersecurity attacks, ransomware attacks, you name it, it's happening, data spillage. And, everybody wants to make sure that they're working with a company who's mature and responsible when handling information, because otherwise you're going to land them on the front page of the Washington Post in a very embarrassing way. Now, when a big company pursues ISO 27001, their WAN, their wide area network, their LAN, their firewalls, their cloud, all of that stuff is being inspected. And it is really hard to pass that. When a small business pursues that, well, they have all the processes and procedures and policies and guidelines for when they do grow into that kind of company. But that's not what they're audited against. They're inspected to, do you have a clear desk, clear screen policy in place? Do you have a shred record showing that you shredded or destroyed your proprietary information that you printed out and used to come up with your pricing proposal? Do you have document proof that you shredded and destroyed that so it's not out there? Do you have a policy regarding your employees' internet usage? Are you going to require that they change their email password every 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 20 weeks, whatever it is? Are you require them to use 3 of the 4 character sets or 4 out of the 4 character sets, and that kind of stuff? They want to make sure you have very basic information security stuff that's applicable to the company size that you want. So these small businesses are able to very easily obtain ISO 27001 when they're much bigger partners are sitting there thinking like, wow, how did you do that? Because they're being crushed by it. They're years away from being able to be able to get that credential because they're a mess, with all of their stuff that they're doing. For you, you're not doing all that stuff. It's easiest, one of the easiest certifications to get when you're really small. Same way with the ISO 9001. That bad look is going to keep you, in the middle of the pack, because every small business is perceived to be a high risk, business. So how many small businesses are registered to do federal government, work? Well, somewhere between 70 and 90,000. that are on the SBA Dynamic Small Business Database, registered to do federal government contracting. Now, how do you compete against 70,000? Well, you compete against 70,000 by not competing against 70,000. So there's 70,000 small businesses, minimum. Like I said, it's up to 90,000 sometimes. Now there's over 18,000 SDVOSBs. There's over 11,000 women-owned small businesses registered. There's over 6,000 8A company, and there's over 5,000 HubZone companies. So what can you do? Well, very first thing that I would do is, if I was a one-person company, I'd become a HubZone. Now, you're not competing against the full 70,000 generic small business. You're competing against other HubZones, 5,000. So but still 5,000, a hell of a lot of companies. So how do you get that down to a more reasonable numbers? By discriminators, by having things that other companies don't have, that places you above them. Things like ISO certification. Less than 1% of U.S. companies have a single ISO certification. Less than 0.1% of U.S. companies have 2 or more. So if you look at this right here, this is holding true almost. 50 out of 5,000. What is that? That's 1%. And of HubZones have a single ISO certification. But if you have 2 or more, now you're down to 16. So you've just reduced your effective competitive field from 70,000 to now you're one of 16 or 17 companies that look like you. And then what you do is you go find a market space where the overwhelming majority of these 16 people, your real competitors for these awards, where they're not participating. And you are going to consistently win. Because I want you to think about that. You've got 21 billion as a HubZone. There's 21 billion prime dollars earmarked every year. Now this is conservative, these numbers. And subcontracting earmarks, there's over 10 billion. So you've got over $31 billion earmarked for HubZones, and you'd be one of 17 that have two or more ISO certifications, making you the most, giving you the appearance of being the most mature, lowest risk HubZones. I hope this helps, and I will see you in the next podcast.